Hello, it's 7 o'clock. We're live from Buckingham Palace on the eve of the coronation of King Charles III. Camping overnight for a view of the King and rewarded with a handshake. Thousands line the Mall.
My mum and dad went to the Queen's, and my dad talked about nothing about it, talked about it all the time before he died. So, yeah, it's really special. It's my 7th event here.
Before his crowning, a reception for world leaders at Buckingham Palace. Outside, tight security, with protests expected and a warning officers will move to stop any disruption. Exclusive polling for Sky News suggests the King is more popular just than the royal family, but support for a republic is rising. But up and down the country, young and old prepare to celebrate the coronation of the new King. Hello, good evening. Welcome to a Sky News special programme, live from Buckingham Palace. Tomorrow, a king is crowned. The eyes of the world will be on the longest-serving heir apparent, as he is formally bestowed with regal powers in a religious ceremony at Westminster Abbey. We'll bring you the details of what key moments to look out for, and we'll be speaking to someone playing a prominent role in the coronation service. Well, tomorrow, an occasion for pageantry and celebration, and also a solemn religious ceremony. Today, though, a more relaxed atmosphere as the King and the Prince and Princess of Wales greeted crowds of well-wishers on the Mall, many of whom had camped out overnight. Our royal correspondent Laura Bundock reports.
They'd come to see him, so when he went to see them, this was the reaction.
You're looking great. Is this, you were camping?
Yeah, we are camping since Wednesday. Since Wednesday.
Congratulations.
Hello, Charles.
Even if it rains.
Yes, it'll be beautiful. It'll be amazing.
How did he seem to you?
Really friendly.
Yeah, he seemed really nice. Really
Nervous at all, do you think?
No, he plays it cool if he
Yeah,
did.
I don't think he seemed that nervous.
No, I didn't think so.
And for one Frenchman, the British royalty have really left a mark.
It's for the cipher Camilla, the cipher of Elizabeth II, and the cipher of the death of Elizabeth.
On either side, crowds lined the Mall, and royals walked the line, the Prince and Princess of Wales taking time to chat and thank the fans.
Have you camped out here?
Yeah, I'm going to be here tonight.
No way.
Yes, I am.
Well done you.
Yes, no tent.
There's not much sleeping going on.
No,
We're
it's
sat in
going
the
to be
chairs.
exciting. We're going to have a party.
I think it'll be a good party atmosphere.
Yeah, we're going to have a party.
Have you stayed out for anything like this before?
Yes, Jubilee.
Did you?
Yes, saw you go by.
So you know, you're prepared.
I didn't. This is my first time. I cannot believe I'm meeting you.
That's you.
Just over 2,000 people have invites, a guest list recast to reflect modern society.
How do you think you'll feel when you're sat inside the Abbey?
I do think I will be looking to wipe back an eye, a tear or something like that, because it is something that's a, amazing experience to be involved in.
With one day to go, one final rehearsal for the King and Queen Consort, complete with robes and regalia. And then to greet their guests, the pull of a royal ceremony bringing together a who's who of global politics.
What's been exciting is to see leaders coming from the 4 corners of the world to celebrate this, and for all of our 56 members of the Commonwealth, representing 2.5 billion people.
There are a lot of views about this coronation, the King and the monarchy. But take a step back, and this remains a hugely significant moment in British history, and one that very few will have seen before.
They've been waiting days for the coronation, but the King's waited longer than any other British monarch, and his time has almost come.
Well, we'll bring in Laura shortly, but first let's take you through what to expect tomorrow. At 7:30 in the morning, guests will begin arriving at Westminster Abbey. The King's procession will depart from Buckingham Palace at 10:20, arriving outside the Abbey's west door shortly before the service begins at 11. The King will be crowned around halfway through the ceremony. Then at 1 o'clock, the new King and Queen will depart in a coronation procession that will take around 45 minutes to return to Buckingham Palace. And finally, at 2:30, they'll be joined by members of the royal family on the palace balcony. Members of the public on the Mall will then be treated to a military fly-past to round off the day. Well, Laura joins me now. And Laura, the King, busy today, seems relaxed, seems ready, hosting guests in the palace behind us.
That's right. This is the third event the King's been to today. So this is basically all the world's good and great gathering at Buckingham Palace. There's nothing like a royal ceremony, like a coronation, that will really bring out the global leaders here. So that's underway at the moment. But you're right, I'm told he's in good spirits, very much wanting to get out and about today. He had this last full dress rehearsal. I'm told it involved everything, basically ironing out the last few little bits that perhaps needed some work on for the service. But this is what the crowds had wanted to see. You mean, the weather has been pretty changeable today, and I'm told that's exactly what the King wanted to do. He wanted to see them, and he wanted to say thank you. Because don't forget, we've never had a moment where the King knows these crowds are all here just for him. Because that's what this coronation is all about. And they are the die-hard fans. I mean, some of them camping for days and days, but you talk to them and it really makes a difference. I met Bernadette from Canada. She was saying how in 1953 her parents had come to London for the Queen's coronation, and here she is 70 years on. And the fact we're getting these walkabouts is another sort of modern moment, I think. And I think one of the big challenges has always been how you harmonise in the 21st century this really ancient ceremony, and how you try and make it feel a bit more modern and relevant. And we've seen the King doing that with the guest list, haven't we? We've seen it with the involvement of other faith leaders having these ceremonial roles. We'll have a Hindu Prime Minister giving a Bible reading. But this sort of sense of innovation in terms of the ceremony and how that all plays out, it's been interesting. Remember, 1953, the very, very different Britain, wasn't it? I was trying to remember how many guests from 53 will be in the Abbey tomorrow. I mean, the King was a little boy. I imagine there's a couple of others, but you could probably count them on one hand. Most of us have never seen a coronation before, let alone what's meant to be a more modern version of that. And really, the hours are ticking down before we find out exactly what that's going to look like.
OK, Laura, thanks very much. It's going to be a fascinating day. Well, our royal events commentator Alistair Bruce is joining me now, plus Christina Kyriakou, former communications secretary to Prince Charles and the Duchess of Cornwall. But first, let's take a look at some of the key events of the day.
I'm Alistair Bruce, and these are the key moments to look out for in King Charles III's coronation here at Westminster Abbey. The first thing to look out for will be the excellence of the ceremonial pageantry delivered by the armed forces that will bring the King in his carriage here to the Abbey and then return him in the gold state coach back to Buckingham Palace. Inside the Abbey will be the glory of the music. Much of it has been specially commissioned by the King for this service, but there will be traditional music that takes us back to the whole story of this coronation through the ages. Look out for the oath. The King will make 3 promises, and then he will sign a document. And it's the only time a monarch will sign a written covenant with his people. Perhaps the most poignant moment in the ceremony will come when the King's son, the Prince of Wales, will kneel before him and make homage. He will place his hands together and dedicate his life to serve his father. But the most important part of the coronation ceremony will be the anointing, when the King is anointed with oil on his head, on his chest, and on his hands. And this will be followed immediately by the investiture of all the symbols of sovereignty and the crowning itself.
Well, our royal events commentator, Alistair Bruce, joins me now, plus Christina Kyriakou, former Communications Secretary to the then Prince Charles and the Duchess of Cornwall. Lovely to see you both. Alistair, to you first of all, are all the preparations done? Is that it? Are all the T's crossed and the I's dotted, or will there be lots happening tonight?
Well, I hope so. They've been rehearsing a great deal. The King was in the Abbey again today, and it's really important. The Earl Marshal has put his plan together. The Archbishop of Canterbury has prepared the service. The armed forces have supported the whole project. But all of them have been rehearsing like mad. And what we will see tomorrow is what Britain does best. We're going to see the armed forces come out and do their part to take the King to the Abbey. We'll see the finest of the liturgical music that has been prepared by unbelievable musicians, not only with music from the past, but also modern compositions that have been put together for the coronation at the King's request. And then I think there's just going to be a panoply of music, and we're going to see signs and symbols that have resonance right back to the start of time in this nation. And I think that even if you find it really difficult to watch, there is a story there, and I think it'll be wonderful to see it all. And if you can, just let the story permeate and be a part of it, because it belongs to us all.
Christina, you know the King. How much do you think the ceremony itself means to him?
Well, I know he has a very, very strong faith, and his interactions with all faiths in the past 30 years have been incredible. He really does see himself as protector of faiths, and so that will be an enormously huge part for him. But I think the celebration, and I think also emotion. He'll be thinking of his mother. He was, of course, 4 years old when the coronation happened last time, and he was watching. So the last time he was in the Abbey for a coronation was then, and 70 years later, here he is, having had 60 of those years working so hard to do good, in public service, very much, absolutely the monarch in waiting. And I think he'll be reflecting on all of that and what this means for the future as well.
Alistair, is there a particularly tricky part of the day? I mean, there's obviously the very key moment when he is actually crowned king, but is there a part you think that the military who are here and all those who've organised it will just breathe a small sigh of relief when it's finished?
The armed forces are really good at this, and they've been being trained under the guidance of the Major General Commanding the Household Division and the Garrison Sergeant Major here in London District. And I can tell you, there is nobody as good as them to put these things together. I think it'll be fine, and the armed forces do that very well. Within the church, you have a ceremony that is resonant with history and meaning. And I think whatever the King's preparations, it will be quite awe-inspiring for him to take the oaths that he will take and to make his signature of a contract with the people that he will rule well according to the laws, etc., etc. But I think for him, the pressure of knowing so much attention is on every detail of this ceremony. I know that the anointing of the King will be out of sight, but all the rest of it will be very much in sight. And when that 5 pound in weight crown is placed on his head, you know, that's quite a weight to carry. And I sense with all the golden robes that have connections right back to Byzantium. I mean, these stories are going to be, I think, fascinating to see it played out in front of a modern audience. But for the King, there's quite a lot of pressure on him.
Well, as you say, you know, philosophical as well as an actual practical weight for him to carry. Christina, it's incredible to think that he wasn't really involved in the succession planning for this event, because it obviously also meant the death of his mother. But do you think he will have been very, very closely involved in it since that point?
I think subsequently, knowing his attention to detail as I do, he will have been involved. I can remember so many times in the household, he would never speak of a supposed kingmanship or succession planning, because it did mean the death of his dear mama. But now, knowing his attention to detail, knowing you know, the sustainable side of the ceremony, looking at the oils, looking at how he can involve young people, people, looking at how he can make the ceremony diverse and relevant, looking at how it can be multi-faith. It's a Christian ceremony, entrenched in Christianity, but he's brought in elements where Hindu, Sikh and Muslim faiths and Jewish faith can be part of the service. I know that those are details that are specific to him. He will absolutely have had a voice and a say in those things.
Okay. Christina and Alistair, thank you both so much. Christina, we're going to keep you for a little bit longer, but thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Well, as you would expect, security at the coronation is, of course, going to be tight, and protests, including from environmental activists, Just Stop Oil, are expected over the weekend. Police have said any disruption will be treated with a lower tolerance level than normal. Our correspondent Siobhan Freeman-Powell reports.
Hundreds have already arrived and thousands more are on the way. It will be one of the biggest ceremonial events ever seen on the streets of London and the largest security operation.
We've got more than 300 VIPs, prime ministers, presidents, royalty from across the globe coming to our city. We'll have hundreds of thousands of people along the ceremonial procession route. And the job of the police staff is a really hard one, to keep us safe, to keep us secure, but to allow everyone to have a good time. And I'm really confident. The preparation, the planning has been fantastic and exemplary. And you can see behind me some of the hard-working police taking a well-deserved break.
More than 1 million people are expected to come to these streets to celebrate the coronation, and most of them will be peaceful. But with crowds of this size, just one incident could have a huge impact. To ensure ironclad protection on the King's big day, more than 11,000 officers have been deployed, aided by new legislation, which carries up to a year in jail for anyone tempted to cause disruption.
Our assessment of the tipping point to say this protest has gone beyond the reasonable into being disruptive and therefore we're going to intervene, it's a much lower tolerance than it might be on a normal day. That's what this is about.
But the lower tolerance approach seems hard to define.
I'm not going to go into every individual case because it depends on what's exactly happened on the ground that day. But if that is going to fundamentally obstruct the enjoyment and celebration for a significant number of people, that's disrupting the event, and that would probably tip us into action.
Concerning for activists, whose main tactics involve civil disruption, which on Saturday could land them in jail.
What is the right time in the right place? You know, whenever they say this, it's always, why don't you go to the pavement when nobody can see you and do your little protest? But this is absolutely the right time. Look at how many people are here in Parliament. This is the ideal opportunity.
Police have worked with activists to provide a space where they can have their say. But the new laws mean they can protest but not disrupt, a controversial measure the police have to get right, as it's being tested on a day the world will be watching. Siobhan Freeman-Powell, Sky News.
Well, there will, of course, be 2 people crowned tomorrow. The coronation of the Queen Consort will take place in a short ceremony after the King has been enthroned and has received the homage of the congregation. Following the ceremony, she will formally be known as Queen Camilla. She will receive a number of items of regalia during the service, including the Queen Consort's rod. And the human rights barrister and Labour peer, Baroness Helena Kennedy, will carry that rod, and she joins me now. Lovely to see you. So just explain what you actually have to do. At what point do you carry it, and at what point in the service?
The Queen's rod is a symbol in many ways of justice, so I feel it's quite appropriate for me because it's as a lawyer. But it's supposed to be about equity and mercy, and of course that role is in the hands of the King. But the idea is that the Queen Consort supports him in his fulfilment of those great virtues, and the rod symbolises that. And this particular rod was it was created for Mary of Modena in the 17th century, 1670 something, when she was crowned along with James II. And so it's a very old artefact, and I've been told to handle it with very great care. I have to tell you.
You're quite nervous about dropping it.
I'm anxious about the fact that I mustn't trip as I go up some stairs into the Abbey, because it is fragile, and it has it's made of a number of pieces of ivory.
And where is it normally kept? Is it normally kept in the tower?
Well, all these things are kept in the tower, and so they've been brought for the ceremony to the Abbey by those who are the keepers, and they are they handle them as if they were their own precious children, their babies, you know. And so we're given very firm instructions about looking after them.
So you had the dress rehearsal yesterday.
Yes.
Did you actually get to hold the actual rod?
I did, because
Was it very heavy?
It's not especially heavy. I'm to sort of carry it a bit like this, and so the business is about we were practicing pacing, so that you get the timing right as we process into the Abbey, and so the Queen's regalia is brought in actually first, and it is there's a ring which is carried by by Lord Charteris, who was the Bishop of London, and then. I'm there carrying this rod, and a very distinguished military man, a general, Sir Patrick Sanders, is carrying another piece of the regalia, and then behind comes the crown, which was Queen Mary's crown, and it's been carried by the Duke of Wellington.
So this all happens. You process into the Abbey before the royal couple do, and then do you hand it over to the Queen herself?
No, when we arrive, we go up to the altar, and it's handed in to be on the altar, and it's handed to one of the priests who is on the altar, but with the Archbishop of Canterbury. So it's handed over. These different pieces are handed over in preparation for the arrival of the King and Queen Consort, and they take their seats, and then the whole. I mean, it's the most incredible ceremony. I mean, it's an amazing ritual.
You must be incredibly proud to be part of it.
Well, of course. I mean, there's something about the way in which Britain is particularly good at this. I think that I don't know that anywhere else, apart from possibly the Vatican, when there's a sort of papal, one of those events like the papal funeral. I mean, I think Britain, because of its long history and because of that sort of sense of continuity that it brings, there's something about these rituals. And this one, I mean, does date back thousands of years. It will be very familiar to people. I'm brought up as a Catholic, and I'm a Catholic, so it feels very Catholic to me. And of course, that's partly as the bishop who's sitting with me at the ceremony, Lord Charteris says, well, that's because, you know, that's how it was back in those days when it was first created, to anoint a king, and you have a sense that that's what I think that's what makes it the significance. When you think of the Queen and how seriously she took the responsibility and duties of her monarchy, I think that's because this ceremonial really lays a stress on what is expected of someone, that you are noble and righteous, and that you preserve the values of the nation and the responsibility of that. And you feel the force of it when you're in the Abbey at this ceremony.
It's going to be an absolutely fascinating day.
It is.
Yeah,
yes.
Thank you so much for joining us and telling us what it's going to be like. We'll be watching out for you. Fingers crossed you won't trip. I'm sure you'll be brilliant.
I'll try not to trip.
Thank you very much. Well, let's take a look at tomorrow's coronation procession and the service in detail. You heard from him earlier in the programme. Sky's Royal Events commentator Alistair Bruce has more.
The King and Queen Consort depart Buckingham Palace at 10:20 in the Diamond Jubilee State Coach, drawn by 6 Windsor Greys, and process up the Mall, escorted by 4 divisions of the Household Cavalry. At walking pace, the King's procession passes under Admiralty Arch and south of Trafalgar Square into Whitehall. It passes several government buildings, Downing Street and the Cenotaph, before entering Parliament Square. The King and Queen Consort pass by the Palace of Westminster, framed by the flags of the Commonwealth countries, of which he is now head. At the end of the 1.3-mile route, the Diamond Jubilee State Coach pulls onto Broad Sanctuary, outside the west gate of Westminster Abbey, ready for the coronation service to begin at 11 o'clock. The King and Queen Consort will enter through the Great West Door at the rear of the procession up the nave of the Abbey to what is known as the Coronation Theatre, with the King and Queen Consort's throne chairs in the centre. Between those and the high altar sits the coronation chair. To the side are the chairs of estate, where they take their seats. These are the different stages of the coronation. The first is what is known as the recognition. The Archbishop of Canterbury leads the presentation of the King to the congregation at the 4 points of the compass, who respond by acclaiming, "God save the King." Second comes the oath. There will be two. Returning to his chair of estate, the King promises to uphold law and justice, the Church of England, and to look after his people. He then signs both documents, confirming this commitment. The third stage is the anointing. The King's robes are removed, and he sits in the coronation chair, where he is anointed with holy oil by the Archbishop of Canterbury. This will happen behind a specially created anointing screen. Next, the investiture. Remaining in the coronation chair, the Archbishop of Canterbury presents the regalia and crowns the King with St Edward's crown. The next is the enthronement. The King is escorted to his throne chair, which symbolises him taking possession of the kingdom. Finally comes the homage. The Archbishop of Canterbury and the Prince of Wales do homage, and then the public will be invited to do so if they wish. The Queen Consort is then anointed in her chair of estate and is then crowned before being escorted to the throne chair by the King's side. They then both receive Holy Communion. The King and Queen then pass through the screen to the shrine of St Edward the Confessor. Here the King is divested of his cloth of gold vestments and St Edward's crown before putting on the purple robe of estate and the imperial state crown. Crowned and anointed, the King leaves the Abbey down the nave to the Great West Door. The return journey to Buckingham Palace takes the same route in reverse, but this time with the King and Queen travelling in the gold state coach. The coronation procession will be much larger, comprising the King and Queen, members of the royal family, and a much larger armed forces contingent. After their arrival at the palace, the public will be allowed onto the Mall for a balcony appearance by the royal family later that afternoon.
Well, our correspondent Rhiannon Mills is at Westminster Abbey for us. And Rhiannon, the Abbey behind you has seen so many ceremonies that are of enormous significance, ceremonies of sorrow, ceremonies of joy, but perhaps none as significant as a coronation.
Well, yeah, as you say, this is going to be the main stage for what will be the most symbolic part of the weekend, where we'll see that incredible pageantry and ancient ritual play out. It couldn't feel more different at the moment. The road has been closed behind us, so that's a sense of the anticipation that's building. But already there are still tourists taking their photos, spending that time milling around, looking at the Abbey. The doors, of course, are closed at the moment, but you can see outside two topiary yew trees, which give us a sense of that very natural feel that the King and Queen Consort wanted to shape with the flowers that are going to be used with the service. But tomorrow, of course, outside of here, it's going to be a sea of military personnel as they accompany the King and Queen Consort here to Westminster Abbey and then all the way back to Buckingham Palace. Of course, tomorrow it's going to be a service that many of us have never witnessed in our lifetime, and those who do remember the coronation 70 years ago, well, for them it's childhood memories, including for the man who is going to be at the centre of that service tomorrow. And when you speak to those who in the past have worked with King Charles, they say that we shouldn't underestimate just how emotional that moment is going to be. Of course, Westminster Abbey, the place where the Queen's funeral took place, but also where the King witnessed his own mother, her crowning moment back in 1953. Ever since we found out that this was the weekend that this coronation was going to be held, the messaging from the palace was how this was going to be, yes, a very traditional service, but one that was much more reflective of the United Kingdom today. And they've been drip-feeding little details about what we're going to see in that service. So, for example, faith leaders from different faiths involved, also British Empire medal recipients making up the congregation. This was always going to feel like a very different service, of course. The Queen in 1953 in her 20s. We now have a king who's in his 70s. Tomorrow, he is going to be reconfirming that service to the United Kingdom, but of course in very different times. And he knows that there are challenging years ahead for the monarchy.
Rhiannon, thanks so much. Well, will you be watching? 2 out of 3 people say that they will be celebrating the coronation tomorrow. That is quite a lot of bunting and warm beer. And as the final preparations begin, our correspondent Ashna Hurinag talks to the people putting together the finishing touches.
It is a welcome coincidence that some of those who live down this road remember the last time it happened. Cynthia is expecting a more toned-down celebration to the one she watched aged 23. Nonetheless, she'll be tuning in from the crack of dawn.
Oh, it was lovely. You know, the Queen was so pretty. She was a nice age, you know. They'll be so very different. Yeah, there was more pomp and ceremony in the 1953 one, don't you think so?
You're probably right.
Ken says it will be nostalgic, but not in all the ways he'd like.
I suppose, you know, if I was a lot younger and one thing and another, I would like to have been down the Mall and to watch some old people coming together.
We'll get to see, Ken, 2 British monarchs being crowned in your lifetime.
Yeah.
What's that like?
Astronomical, I think. Or a sign that I'm getting old.
They have a semblance of what to expect, but many of us simply don't. The children of Lawn Primary School in Derby are full of expectation and anticipation.
It's like symbolising a new era for the country, and it's everyone's just coming together as a country to watch it.
I can spend time with my family and watch the king get crowned.
It's for the country to celebrate him, basically, getting crowned. So that's what I'm really looking forward to.
At least they've got the necessary attire and plenty of enthusiasm. These seamstresses have been helping the nation get ready. Their machines haven't stopped churning out the decorations.
In the last 2 months, we have produced 100 kilometres of bunting, which is probably about 2 or 3 times the amount of bunting we would do in any one year, and that's just purely for the coronation.
The coronation of one man.
Big smile.
All eyes may be on the capital, but much of the nation too will also be bathed in red, white and blue. Ashna Haranag, Sky News in Cambridgeshire.
And if you want to post a message for the new King and Queen ahead of the coronation, you can do so on our website. Just scan the QR code on your screen now and it'll take you to our app. And let's take a quick look at some of the messages that have been sent in so far. 6-year-old Harry Penton wrote, "I'm very excited for your coronation. We have been learning all about kings and queens in school, and tomorrow I'm having a tea party at home with my mummy, daddy and sister whilst we watch you get your crown on the TV. Have a lovely day." Jan Barr says, "Got my bunting up? Cannot wait for tomorrow's celebrations. I wish you and Queen Camilla all the very best for the future. You are my king." And Alex Mav said, "Congratulations, Your Majesty. You hold an enormous responsibility on your shoulders. I wish you and your family all the very best." Well, let's talk now about Charles the man. What is the king like as a person and how will his personality inform his reign? Well, I'm joined now by Sir Peter Westmacott, a former British ambassador to the United States and was also former Deputy Private Secretary to Prince Charles. Sir Peter, welcome. And also Christina Kyriakou, who is still with us. She worked as Charles's Communications Secretary while he was Prince, and she is still here with us. Sir Peter, to you first of all, what do you think will set the Carolean age apart from that of Elizabeth II's?
Well, he's had a very long time to prepare for the job, and it's pretty clear to me that from the outset, he's chosen to be his own monarch. Obviously, masses of respect and affection for his mother, but we're seeing a king who is a little more directly engaged, a little less sheltered behind a glass screen from ordinary people and so on. Not that the Queen wasn't tremendously engaging when you talk to her in private, but I think the way in which, for example, the king and his son and daughter-in-law were out this afternoon greeting the crowds here, it's not quite the sort of thing that the Queen used to do, for perfectly good reasons. And of course, the Queen, she was 27 when she became Queen, and she had to pace herself. It was a long reign. The King is taking over at the age of 74, so obviously it's going to be for a little less time, but he's also himself. He's very much engaged with people. He's interested in people. It's not just that he's clever at finding something to say to everyone, though he is, but he's genuinely interested. And so there's a lot of conversation, there's a lot of activity, and of course he will be guided by the British government on anything to do with politics and the role of the monarchy, because that's what the monarch has to do. But he will remain interested in and engaged and supportive on issues like climate change and young offenders and volunteering and many other issues which he's been engaged with. And I think he will also be more directly engaged as part of, if you like, horrible phrase, but I'm going to use it anyway, the soft power of Britain by building up relationships with foreign heads of state, many of whom he knows and many of whom he likes, in a way that I think he probably feels is necessary after the last 6 years of Brexit, where the United Kingdom has been a little bit turning in on itself.
And Christina, talking about his personality there, and I wonder, Peter, but, you know, I was thinking about the day after the Queen died and how he came here, and I was here at Buckingham Palace when he came and he spoke to the crowds, and perhaps nobody really expected that of him. And as you say, that's been mirrored today, isn't it, in the walkabouts?
Well, it's quite interesting because I was reminded of an occasion where I did an engagement with Her Majesty the Queen and the then Prince of Wales, Prince Charles, and she turned to me and she said, make sure he's quickly following behind me. He does talk so much. He does talk so much. And then I'm waiting at the other end with nothing to do. And that is our king. He loves meeting the public. I think I can recall in 8 years him cancelling a public engagement once because he had the most horrendous chest infection and he virtually had to be tied down to cancel that engagement. He was not going to cancel it. This is a man who has engaged with the public. I think over the past 20 years, he's done something unbelievable, like 20,000 public engagements. He's the hardest working member of the royal family next to his sister, Princess Anne, and he absolutely loves hearing from people around the world, around the Commonwealth, around Britain, seeing what the challenges are, seeing what the issues are, and seeing how he might help. His patronages of 800 different charities and, you know, when he was Prince Charles, have just given him the most enormous insight into what the difficulties and the needs are.
And taking on from that, Sir Peter, we talked about the things that he would do differently to the Queen, but, you know, he has had this extraordinary active life throughout his entire life, in waiting almost, had an opportunity to engage with thousands and thousands of charities. But what kind of preparations do you think that the Queen helped him with, perhaps? That, you know, perhaps, I don't know if he realised that she was subconsciously kind of laying the ground for him.
I would say, speaking entirely personally, of course, that there were two particular things she did for him before she died. One was to make very plain that she wished Camilla to be known as the Queen Consort. So that ended the debate, if ever there was still a debate. And I know that that made an enormous difference to His Majesty. Of course it would, you know, but that was an important. The other thing is that many people forget that the British monarch is not automatically the head of the Commonwealth. And so the other thing that she did was to arrange for the other heads of government in Commonwealth to agree that her son, our new King Charles, would be the head of the Commonwealth. And that was, I think, extremely helpful. It helps the continuity of the relationship between the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth, but particularly the British royal family and the Commonwealth. And that's more than 50 different countries which are part of a voluntary group which come together with shared values and an appreciation of democracy and human rights, which is very important. And of course, never forget that he's also head of state of 15 different countries, which we call realms, some of them tiny in the Caribbean, some of them enormous, Australia and Canada, New Zealand, and so on. So that bit of, if you like, laying the ground for the king to remain, as she was, you know, the head of state of those countries and the head of the Commonwealth, as well as organising, helpfully, his own private life, I think were the two, to me, most important things that she did before she died for her son.
And you're nodding as well. Sir Peter Westmacott and Christina Kyriakou, thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Well, you're watching Sky News. Coming up, how popular is King Charles? We find out what the public think about the royal family. Welcome back to a Sky News special programme, live from outside Buckingham Palace on the eve of the coronation. This is, of course, the Mall. Thousands and thousands of people lining the road down there, preparing to camp out, some for a second night, to get a decent view of the pageantry tomorrow. Sky correspondent Alice Porter is in with the crowds. I don't know if she's got a crown herself. Alice, it's a great atmosphere down there, isn't it? And the sun is shining.
It really is. It's a gorgeous evening here on the Mall, and people seem to be having such a good time. I think it's definitely a few people with a few glasses of wine in hand, ready for their night ahead as they camp out on the Mall, including these two ladies here. Hello, how are you feeling about camping out overnight ahead of the big day tomorrow?
It's a bit of an adventure. We've never done it before. And the atmosphere is just electric.
I think it's the cheerings behind us really sort of say it all. And we were having a bit of a joke, weren't we, that someone was coming through your sitting room, because everyone's got dens, haven't they?
Right.
They've claimed their spot.
We've got our little lounges. Everyone has.
And why was it so important to camp out, to be here all day ahead of tomorrow for the King to come past?
He's our king, and he deserves it. Yes. Very simple.
Because both of you, I know you said to me, you've both been to a number of very important royal events before. Yes. How do you think this will compare to some of the other ones?
I haven't witnessed anything like this, because I haven't camped out. I've just sort of done seeing the Queen lying in state, and that's about it. And that was very sombre. It was a long night, 9 hours. This is really sort of...
This is more fun, isn't it?
Yes, it's fun, and it's child's play. And we sat down.
Yes.
Well, I hope you are both able to get some sleep tonight. I think it might be tricky for a few people. It'll be a bit noisy. Thank you very much for speaking to us. And I hope you have a good day tomorrow, because this is very much where the action will be happening at 10:20 tomorrow, where King Charles will leave Buckingham Palace and make his way along the Mall to Westminster Abbey.
Alice, thanks so much. Well, the Archbishop of Canterbury is going to play a really crucial role in officiating the ceremony tomorrow. The Most Reverend Justin Welby explained to Sky News how much planning had gone into tomorrow's event.
My mood is, first of all, it's not principally about me, it's about the King, and it's a service, it's a Christian service, it's about God. But yes, I'm very conscious of what a huge privilege it is to do it. And we've been doing lots of rehearsals since February, and, you know, it's slowly coming together. During the day, I am spending a lot of time, obviously, thinking through what we're doing and how we're doing it, working with others. It's been enormously collaborative. We've been working with the palace, with the government, with, you know, all kinds of different groups. And it's just been really enjoyable. With the Abbey, lots of laughter, lots of fun, and very serious, thoughtful work. The King is someone who it is very easy to work with. He is really kind, he pays great attention, he thinks very deeply about these things. You can see his Christian faith comes through the whole time, and it's been really fun. But it is also a moment that says we're going to draw on our tradition, we're going to reflect the country as it is now, and we're going to look forward with hope and draw people together. And the point of the coronation, why do we need a coronation? We need a coronation to celebrate all we have been, all we are, and all we will be. They know it or not, and most of them would say, oh, no, I just try and help out. It's inclusive, and I think people will say, oh, there's so many good things happening in this country. People, when they see it, they'll realise why it reaches out. I mean, the first thing that happens is one of the young people, choristers there present, saying to the King, you're welcome, and the King saying, I come not to be served, but to serve. And that's the theme of the service, serving one another. Not just the King to the nation, but each of us to everyone.
Well, 70 years ago, Charles's mother, the late Queen, was crowned. 6 maids of honour flanked Queen Elizabeth in 1953. One of them, Lady Rosemary Muir, spoke to Sky News and reflected on the service.
It was magical. I mean, it was, you know, the music, the colour, the whole sense of majesty was amazing. You know, it was so beautifully choreographed. I suppose you can't say anything more than that. It all went like clockwork. It was very easy in those days. You know, you drove up to the Abbey, parked your car, got out, said hello to the policeman who was drinking a cup of tea in a little box. "Hello, girls," he said. We just walked in. No bits of paper, no, nothing, you know. It was a different world. There was a box with the Queen Mother and Princess Margaret and Prince Charles and a few aunts and uncles, I think, all in this box. And you could hear Prince Charles sort of running up and down, and the Queen Mother sort of getting hold of him and telling him to sit down. But I mean, he was only, what was he, 4, 5? And of course, when we got back to Buckingham Palace, and the Queen took off her crown, put it on a table, and he appeared and grabbed it and shot up the passage with it.
Well, it is now less than 24 hours to go to the coronation, and in a timely boost for the royal family, King Charles is becoming more popular in the run-up to the big event, according to an exclusive poll for Sky News. But it also found that support for a republic has risen to its highest level since the 1990s. Our home editor, Jason Farrell, reports.
Kenilworth in Warwickshire, a fortress for King John, Lancastrians, Tudors, Elizabeth I. Here you'll find a giant ruler of royal succession, and the strength of this timeline through our history has always depended on events and who wears the crown. These walls may have crumbled, but King Charles inherits a country still predominantly monarchist. However, a Sky News Ipsos poll shows support for a republic is at 25%, its highest since the early 90s.
So what makes a popular monarch?
Well, I think it's a number of factors, of course, but firstly, I'd say a monarch shouldn't really kill or persecute its subjects. That's obviously a clear thing. But also, it's all about society, whether society did well at the time. Was it prosperous? Was it politically stable? Were there wars? I mean, Elizabeth I, for example, has gone down as being called Gloriana and Good Queen Bess, and I think that's because she had such a stable, long reign.
And in these times of financial difficulty, our poll shows that more than half of us feel the royals get too much public money.
I respected the kings of, you know, in the past, where they'll be out in the battlefields.
Yeah.
But
you don't care about
it's a privilege. It's a very privileged accident of birth thing that costs a fortune. To see the lavishness of it and the expense of it. One day.
I think they represent the UK all over the world. What they do, visits, bring everyone together, the Commonwealth.
Are they good value for money?
I think so, yes.
Especially a slimmed-down monarchy, you know, sort of working royals, focus on that.
It's survived 1,000 years, but whether people think the monarchy will exist in another 50 years' time fluctuates depending on events. 69% said yes in 1990, dropping dramatically to 36% in 1992 during the Queen's annus horribilis, the breakdown of 3 of her children's marriages and revelation of Charles's affair with Camilla. Then, after the death of Diana in 1997, came the Crown's biggest crisis. Belief in the monarchy's durability dipped below 30%, its all-time low. Over the next 15 years, the Queen revived people's faith in the institution. And in the year of the Diamond Jubilee and the Olympics, where the Queen was part of the ceremony, 60% of people thought the monarchy would endure another half-century. But that has dipped again, amid recent scandals of Prince Andrew and Harry and Meghan cutting themselves loose from the royal fold. Sky's poll shows the figure is now at 46%. Londoners and the Scottish are least supportive of the monarchy, according to our poll. This was the cue for the Book of Congratulations in Glasgow, and here we found little enthusiasm for the big day.
especially with the number of people striking who should be getting a wage increase. It's totally... Well, it's never the right time for them to be doing it, but it couldn't be worse.
Got people saying, oh, tourism, people come watch it, but when you've got the rest of the nation, like, literally struggling day to day, I think it's absolutely disgusting, personally.
I know in Scotland there's probably not the same banners and street parties, but as a family we're going to celebrate it just at home quietly, watch it on the telly and stuff, and have the family round.
Interestingly, over more recent years, Charles has seen his personal favourability rise from 32% in March 2018 to 52% today, whereas his youngest son, Prince Harry, who was hugely popular just 5 years ago with a 65% rating, is now third most unpopular of the key royals, just ahead of his wife Meghan and Prince Andrew. William is the most popular royal. And William is key to royal longevity, especially among the 18 to 35-year-olds, who are 10% more likely to be Republicans, reflected in the views of these 30-somethings drinking in the Royal Pug in Royal Leamington Spa.
Are you interested in the monarchy?
No, not really. It sounds bad, but no, I'm not.
I love the monarchy. However, I do feel that King Charles should have stepped aside and let Will and Kate in.
They don't seem to do anything for us. I don't know what it is they do, to be honest, apart from bring money into London.
There are lessons in recent and ancient history. For now, Britain wants to maintain its monarchy, just a cheaper version. Jason Farrell, Sky News.
Well, Christina Kyriakou, former Communication Secretary to then Prince Charles and Duchess of Cornwall, is here with us. And Christina, what do you make of the coronation effect? Charles now more popular than the royal family as a whole. Do you think he's going to be a popular king?
I hope he's going to be a very popular king because he's put the work in and he's taken the ridicule. When he first mentioned plastic pollution in the 70s, he was ridiculed. When he mentioned organic farming, he was ridiculed. When he mentioned sustainability and climate change, he was ridiculed. Everyone's always thought he was mad, but his future gazing has stood the test of time. I think it's easy with anyone, but particularly someone who's under the most intense public scrutiny, as the king has been, to remember the moments when mistakes have been made. But when you think 70 years in public service, those mistakes are few.
You talk about the 70 years. We've got some footage now of the coronation back in 1953. And just looking at these images, it really reminds you how much times have changed. And we talk a lot about all the things the Queen saw during her reign and the changes to society. But of course, Charles was there and saw them all too.
He was there, and in the era when the Queen was crowned, it's easy to forget that television had only really just come into being, and there weren't really any studio lights in the Abbey. There was one broadcaster broadcasting from the Abbey. This is a modern celebration. It's a celebration with global media attending. It's a celebration of a king who accedes to the throne with 70 years experience. He has an opinion and we know what he stands for.
Christina, thank you so much. Lovely to speak to you. Well, that's it for the Sky News special programme.